Do we have any burning questions from the floor? Nope. Not at the moment. You're very quiet this morning. So we'll move to, oh, hold on. Luke is doing a great job bringing up the stairs. He's found one.
Thank you. Troy Baisden, New Zealand Association of Scientists co-president. Last week we had a prominent scientist roaming New Zealand and commenting that we should do incentives better. And in my gruff American accent, I often give diplomatic advice that's not well received, that we've been trying to price emissions, we've been trying to create pain. But New Zealand farmers, the first thing I learned when I came to New Zealand over 20 years ago was they don't want to respond to incentives because they still remember the 1980s. If I framed that in relation to your talks, is that a question that you'd like to respond to and argue maybe we should think about incentives that get us going in the right direction on this future path?
Okay. Yeah, look, great question. And the incentives absolutely is part of the He Waka Eke Noa package, I guess, whereby, you know, you have an environmental levy that therefore flows through and is available to provide incentives for mitigation options. So I think we are heading down that space. I do hear what you say, and I am challenged by other farmers saying, really, Nikki, do we want to go down this track where we are getting a handout? You know, they have long memories, farmers. So, and they are proud of the fact that they've come through, those, decades of tough times, but not relying on subsidies. So, but there's a big difference in my mind between a subsidy and incentive. And I know that might be a subtle sticking point, but I think it is different.
Great question, and I see it in two parts. One is actually achieving the outcome. So we've got He Waka Eke Noa, and potentially there's some, maybe some vaccines coming down the line, maybe there's some bullets coming down the line. Now, dairy is inherently easiest for us to use that technology. We see our cows twice a day. They are relatively domesticated. They were relatively used to being handled. So I see a real opportunity for a fund, whether it's funded through He Waka Eke Noa, to pay the likes of myself to actually put that bullet or inject that cow, but then you actually socialise the benefits across that whole ag sector, because one of the things that we've actually got, we need to make an ag sector reduction. We don't need to necessarily make every farmer drop by a given percent. So that's about shifting the bell-shaped curve. So I see some real opportunities around that of how we can work together as a sector with those farmers that by chance are actually see their animals twice a day in many instances to actually do that. So I see that incentive being really positive in that light. So about socialising that. Do I think we should have incentives to get farmers on board with change? No, I don't. Because I think one of the things that came through in yesterday's discussion, a lot of science, very, very good, not debating the science, brilliant academics, I'm absolutely in awe of them. But the one thing is not there is how do we understand the psychology of change in any population. And I do a lot of work in the Rural Support Trust and working with people under all sorts of stress and all sorts of circumstances. And I also came through the 80s and led a lot of those meetings and all that. Once, at the end of the day, every decision is about headspace. Once you move that headspace, you get there. How do you do that? You take people to a higher level and you provide context. Because the one thing that humanity has in common, regardless, is fundamentally deep inside, they want to do the right thing. And when you actually give context to what is the worst case scenario here? I do it with people that are going through grief or change or losing farms. What's the worst case scenario here? When they come to grips with that and understand, okay, the worst case scenario is this, then they're in a position to move forward. So we've done a lot of science, but we haven't actually pulled in the psychology of change to actually, and you look at the wartime leaders, you look at any of the great leaders, they understood the psychology of taking people to a place they don't want to go.
just also, Troy, I think maybe not so much subsidies, but I think there's certainly an opportunity for co-investment, because one of the things that a lot of the work that's done in this space neglects is that it's very easy for a model to say we can change from dairy to horticulture and make more money and lower emissions. But what that analysis often misses is the significant capital movements that have to support that. And our pastoral industries are pretty much leveraging off the investment that our earlier generations made a long time ago and expect very low returns on. If we're trying to accelerate land use change potentially, or accelerate our industry's change, we might need to think about more differently around how does government co-invest with industry to actually put the infrastructure in place to support that, because there's going to be a lot of sunk capital that's going to be written off, and people are going to be opening their wallets to invest in new capital.
There's quite a perverse effect with incentives, and the ones that can take it up will take it up. The problem is for us, for a lot of Māori and corporations and a lot of small Māori landowners, we don't have that ability to move. You look, one of the things that they incentivise, like for instance, in the fisheries game, they took away the ability to be able to use overseas charter vessels to fish our quota. We didn't own any boats, so Tallies and the rest of them didn't fish our quota. Now, that's a perverse effect of incentivising someone to move to some other way, and that's going to happen with Māori lease blocks. If you've got 1,000 hectares, say, reduced by 10, that 100-hectare lease block, just cut it off, leave it alone. So I think you've got to look at incentivisation in a way that gets people, and back to George's kōrero, gets people to make a change because it's the bloody right thing to do, not because I'm going to make more money out of it. It's going to instead of me only earning net profit of $200, I'm going to earn I'm going to continue earning $200. No, enough is enough. When we have 1,000-year time frame at looking at something, return on investment over 1,000 years is pretty easy. You do it now, you don't have to do it later. So 25 years for the mortgage for B&Z, and don't get me started on banks anyway, but no, that's all good.
Just one last comment. I think the challenge on society is to move the value system from standard of living to quality of life.
Thanks everyone. For the interest of time, I know there's a couple of good questions that have come through on the app, but I'm sure the presenters can have a look at some of those questions, and they're here for the rest of the afternoon. I'm sure they'll be willing to chat to anyone. So if you can join me in just thanking everybody from the panel.